I'm very excited to be here with Claire Warner, who is now looking at my Facebook page as he's shared on her Facebook page, and Ali Dedianko. How do I pronounce your last name?
Oh, I was going to see if you got it right the first time. You were close. You're close. It's Dedianko.
Dedianko. Philip actually told me, and then I forgot. So thank you, Dedianko. Because I'm terrible at that sometimes about pronouncing people. So I'm really trying to be conscious of it and ask people that now. So I'm really excited to be with, it's very funny. It's like having this interview, I laugh and, thinking about it, it's like Claire and I became brand ambassadors almost at the exact same time. And then to be talking to her, I almost feel like Claire was your mentor, right? To the next generation of brand ambassadors up and coming. And we've now surpassed that, and now we're in roles of brand ambassador, advocacy, and director roles, which are amazing. And all of us have kind of seen where the brand ambassador role can take us in our careers. I think that's what we all have in common here. But I wanted to start off by just asking you ladies, what is the brand that you work for and what are your responsibilities in that role? So Claire, I'll start with you.
I am the co-founder of Æcorn, which is the sister brand to Seedlip. Of course, Seedlip is the world's first distilled non-alcoholic spirit, sort of created, I suppose, the non-alc revolution that we're all living through right now. Æcorn came along a couple of years later and is a range of non-alcoholic aperitifs.
Love it. I still haven't tasted it yet. I'm excited to get my hands on some. But it's only in UK right now, yes?
Yeah, it should be in the US early next year.
Fantastic. And Ali?
Well, I was going to say Æcorn's delicious.
I'm excited. I'm looking forward to it.
It's really good. So I am Ali Dedianko, and I run the advocacy team for Brown Forman UK. Brown Forman being the parent company to Jack Daniels. I think most people know that, but in case they don't, that's usually the way I describe the role to people who aren't in our industry, as if they say, what's Brown Forman? You just say Jack Daniels and then everyone knows. So we've got a lot of other brands under the portfolio: Woodford Reserve, Slane Irish Whiskey, Chambord, Ford's Gin, a new acquisition. And I'm forgetting some. The tequilas. We've got Herradura, El Jimador. And I feel like I've forgotten something, but that's the ones I remember off the top of my head right now.
What I know about Brown Forman. Now I'll go back to Claire, as a co-founder, and I know there's been some transitions within the company. What is your role at the moment in time?
So, face of the brand. I mean, it comes full circle really, because you become the ultimate ambassador for that brand. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of education still to do for the category, for the brand specific. And so, face of the brand, doing all of the sort of training, the selling in, the education, getting people excited for it, getting people to understand the opportunity, talking to the consumer, talking to retailers. I mean, it's no different from everything that I've been doing over the last 20 years. It's just that I happen to have created that brand.
I know, and that's a big difference, because you're now talking about something, it from such an intimate place. Like, you're like, this is my baby. I'm putting it out there in the world, which has got to change. As good as brand ambassadors as I know that, you both are. And I know how it was, like, we spoke about the brands like they were our babies, right? When we spoke about them, but now it really is your baby. Like, you put that out in the world, you created that liquid from scratch. You can answer every intimate detail about it. So must change.
But I won't, because there's some proprietary information there, but I'll tell you what I think you need to know, and that's about it. But the same for Belvedere. I think we got, I spent a long time crafting and working really closely with the distillery team at Shadadov to create those liquids too. So I think, all ambassadors really get under the skin of their brands. I suppose I've just gone slightly further under the skin, into the skeleton, into the DNA of Æcorn. So that's basically what my role entails today.
Fantastic. And Ali, I found that brand advocacy directors or the people in manage it have many different roles, so tell me what exactly your responsibilities are.
Well, you gave me a promotion, which I'd love. So
you're the director. I say so.
If anyone's listening, I would be happy with that title. But I manage a team of 8. I've got 5 brand ambassadors and 3 portfolio ambassadors who are in my team. The portfolio ambassadors are based regionally, and sort of, the clue is in the name. They look after the full portfolio. So I've got, I guess the way I describe them is I've got generalists, my portfolio ambassadors, who are regional specialists, but portfolio generalists. And then I've got brand specialists who cover the whole UK, but who obviously are less knowledgeable about the individual venues or the nuances of certain regions. And, obviously the UK is a much smaller country than the US. Tiny, in fact, but the differences, still exist between regions. So, who our competitors are in Scotland might be very different to who they are in London, or even in, the middle of the country. So that's why it's important to have people who understand the full commercial landscape, as well as then people who really understand, the DNA of the brands that they look after.
No, absolutely. And are you like their spirit guru, their education trainer, mental, therapist, like all
I don't think they would say that.
Yeah.
Yes, I am their guru. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly that.
No, I think I try to provide, that advice where I can. Something I'm trying to get better at doing is actually doing more coaching and less answer giving. I think I said this to you when we spoke before, Elaine, is that I'm quite solutions orientated person. And often when someone comes to me with a problem, I think, oh, I can solve this for you with a quick answer. But then that same problem comes back to me time and time again, because I haven't actually taught them how to solve the problem themselves. So I think that's something that's what I should be doing more of, is more coaching. And then generally, I'm also the person who is, doing the back of house stuff, the really sexy number counting, keeping them on track with their KPIs and all that stuff that I think when you make the jump from bartender to brand ambassador, that maybe you don't think you're going to have to do, the reporting side of things, make a case for why you need to make that trip, or why that event's important, or why we should invest in that customer.
Absolutely. We're going to talk about that later on also, with the less sexy side of the business. But and you did talk about that, because it is, being a manager is hard, and learning how to coach, because everybody here are doers, right? So we're, problem solvers, you get stuff done. And being a manager, as you said, like taking that step back, and then and it's painful sometimes, but you have to be patient as you educate them on how to go through the process. And because it takes time, being a manager takes time. And I know, Claire, you've done this as well. Thoughts about
me?
Yeah, exactly. So Ali, would you consider Claire a coach?
I think she's a great coach now. I think initially when I started, she was probably like, oh my God, just how do I tell this person to just get it done, because she's a disaster. And I just also want to clarify, my team is really experienced and super knowledgeable, and they do come to me for things, but like they're way far and away more experienced than I was when I started out in this role. So I would say Claire had a lot more to tackle. I have more people, but Claire had a big undertaking when she took a 25-year-old bartender straight into a global role. That was like, whew.
Yeah, that's a big thing. And we're going to talk about, I want to hear that story of how you went from there. And I think a lot of people would like to hear that story. Claire, how was it to coach Ali?
I think we coached each other through it, frankly, because I think, I mentioned to you yesterday, Elaine, I was not used to collaborating. I was used to doing everything myself. And all of a sudden, Ali's there, and I'm sort of saying, just do it, JFDI. What do you need me for? I'm just here to you do you, babes.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, I was like, I don't know what that means.
Yeah.
Not another acronym. What is this new JFDI?
Oh my God, you're so right. The acronyms. We didn't even speak about that, Elaine. That was one of the major things, the corporate boundaries. Wow.
Yeah, no, so many people talk about that. That's one of the hardest things to learn. Actually, I realized I forgot to put that in my presentation I gave in Berlin recently, that the things you have to learn, the acronyms alone. But let's talk about, because Ali, you brought it up already, that you know, you were a 25-year-old bartender, you came into this role. I think how you became a brand ambassador is really fascinating because it's not the usual way. So give us a little backstory there.
Yeah, so I won my job in a cocktail competition, which I guess it wasn't a typical cocktail competition, not like you maybe would see today. You know, there was a lot more to it than just making cocktails. And I also want to clarify that I'm definitely and was not the best bartender of the bunch, but the role entailed a lot more than just making a cocktail. So way back in 2010, Belvedere, well, Claire and Chelsea Handler, weirdly, launched the Belvedere Dream Job. And it was, you know, this amazing opportunity to work with Belvedere for a year-long contract. You know, you're a bartender now. Tomorrow you could be the global brand ambassador, travel around the world, work with Claire. You know, it sounded super glamorous. So I applied, and there was many stages to it. One of the first entry stage was, you know, submit a 1-minute video. And this is sort of early days of Facebook. So I don't know if you remember this, Claire, but remember the videos were uploaded onto Facebook and people voted on them. And so wow. I think, yeah, so to get through the rounds, it was like fan favorites, but then equally, you know, there was some that there was like the fan favorite automatically got through. And then there was obviously internal judging of like, this person would be good. So, you know, there was one guy who was like, had an amazing video and he was just really great in front of the camera. And he was so charismatic. And, so he got through as the fan favorite. And then the rest of us who got through to the next round were, you know, people who I guess Claire and the team had seen potential in. Then from there was another second round, make another video that was a bit more in depth, a bit more about, you know, like what is it that you love about bartending and what is it you love about Belvedere. And then from there it was whittled down to 8 of us, and there was 8 of us from around the globe. There was, I think, 2 people from Australia, 3 from Canada, 1 from Scotland, and wow. 3 of us from the US, something like that, split. And I just always remember the final was in New York, and I was living in New York. You know, I'm not from New York originally, but I went to NYU and I was living there for a decade. And so everybody else got these amazing trips, like, you know,
she feels
flying over from Australia, business class. And it was like, wow, this is incredible. Oh, we've got a guest.
Mac.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I just got on the subway and went to the West Side, and I was like, oh, I mean, I better win, because otherwise I haven't even gotten half the prize.
But if I don't win, then I can't actually get to travel around the world.
Yeah, exactly. But we staged the competition. There was a live like 2-day final, I want to say, and they really put us through the ringer. You know, it was, to be honest, I mean, it was like unlike any competition that I have. Well, I'd say unlike any competition that I've seen today, but obviously I think, you know, Diageo world class and obviously legacy, those are really, you know,
these are intense. But you're competing for a job. They're competing for fame.
True. Yeah, this is true. But I would say that those competitions are, you know, those are pretty intense. But yeah, so it was, you know, you did a presentation element where you presented a cocktail, and then the brief for the second part was really open, and it was just you know, bring your A game, show us your show us your star quality, like bring your A game, do whatever you want, bring the brand to life. So I used my hometown advantage to stage a flash mob.
Love that.
Which was, I had some friends dotted around the audience, because you could bring people, you could invite anyone you wanted. And we did a little dance number to a Lady Gaga song. And shook cocktails in the mix. We shook up martinis. People just kept coming in. I really don't, even to this day, I sort of don't remember that I did that. And I remember the moment where the song came on and I thought to myself, oh my God, am I going to do this? This is so embarrassing. So it was either like, you've embarrassed yourself and people are going to talk about this forever, or you'll win. But I kind of think it was the perfect time, because it was 2010. So like Facebook existed, but not everyone had camera phones. So like that footage isn't really out there.
It obviously worked, because you got hired. Claire, it must have impressed you.
It did impress us. Not just the flash mob. I mean, everything Ali did was really incredible. But after she won, sending Ali to Asia would often elicit the request for her to do a show, because that's how she won this competition. And Ali was constantly like, what is the show you want me to do? And they're like, just do the show. How did you win the competition? And, you know, I think at one point, weren't you up on a big stage? Yes. Bartending in front of like like hundreds of people or something. It was really hard for her to, you know, do the job after winning a competition of that kind.
Oh, that's so funny. So they want you to bring your flash mob with you wherever you went.
Yeah, it was like, oh, this is what she does. She dances. This is her thing. Like she puts on like a Madonna style, you know, comes in with like the mic. And so yeah, Claire's right. One of the first gigs I did, I went to Singapore, and it was they said, yeah, we've got you this amazing opportunity to present at, it was like a food and wine show, and it was on top of I don't know if it's still there. It's called One Altitude, and it's like one of the tallest buildings in Singapore, and there's a restaurant and bar on top. And so they like set up this bar, and they had consumers, and they were like, okay, so each night you're going to have a different theme and a different outfit change. And we want it to be like, what's the music? I was like, what am I doing to the music? They're like, you know, your show.
Your show.
Oh my God.
Goodness, I don't have to do this gig.
But I was also so new in the role, and I couldn't. I felt like,
I must do this thing.
Is this?
Yeah.
So obviously it wasn't quite the same, but I you know, I tried to provide some sort of entertainment value. I felt like we're like hype master just out there. Yeah.
Wow, that's hilarious. That is the first time I think I've ever heard that for a brand ambassador, having to actually put on a performance, because that's what people thought you did. So you were not only a brand ambassador, you were Madonna with a flash mob.
Yeah, I think people were like,
people used to always ask me. Yeah, well, people used to always ask me to flare. I don't know if anyone else has experienced this, but I always used to be asked to flare. And also, I want to just say, no disrespect to flare, I can't do it. It's very impressive.
It's very hard.
Like it looks so hard. But so it was almost, because it is quite big, I would say in Asia, a lot of bartenders can flare. And even in Eastern Europe, a lot of bartenders can flare. And, you know, I remember, Claire, you probably remember this too, in Poland, often they would say, right, we've got these guests coming, like, are you going to do a flare show? And I was like, I can't flare. And it was almost like I was then looked down upon, like, all right, well, you're not a real bartender. You can't flare. We'll get someone in.
You can't flare. So you don't know how to make any drinks. I don't care if you know all the things about vodka and Belvedere and make all the classic cocktails, but you can't put on a show. Yeah. No use for us.
I think quite quickly we were like, we're not the best bartenders. We love bartenders and we love great cocktails, but our value is not behind the bar making drinks. Because, you know, by that point, I hadn't been a bartender for 10 years. Ali, you know, is a great bartender, but, you know, it was about trying to establish yourself, adding value in a different place. Yeah. And also, I would say, like, I don't want to come into a town or a bar and say to the bartender, off you go, out the way, I'm here to make you a martini. You know, it's rude. So it was rude. A real education about, like, culturally, what are we here to do for you when we're in your market, you know, as ambassadors, remembering that at the time ambassadors were still relatively new. And I think that the preconception was that we were bartenders there to teach you about drinks, as opposed to why is our brand relevant for bartenders and drinks. And so that was a bit of a transition that we both had to go through over many years, to consistently say, we're not here to show you how to make cocktails. We're here to talk to you about the brand. And yes, it's great for cocktails, but let's explain to you why. And also, you know, we make great martinis, but maybe that's about it now.
I'm not talking about, you know, I always tell people, I'm like, I'm really good. If you want me to make you one drink at a time, I'm amazing.
Yeah. But also I used to go to bars and they'd be like, here you go. What are you going to make us? And I'm like, I don't know, because you've got 2 olives and a couple of bits of old lime. I mean, I know that. I mean, I can make you a martini. So it was that, you know, show us what you can do. So it was constantly like this. And actually, when Ali joined, we had a bit more time to sort of create, you know, talk about what the expectation for our visit should be and set the expectations, set the boundaries. Before that, I would literally be back to back and show up and be like, I'm here. And, you know, with Ali on board, I remember us sort of saying, we can't work like this anymore. We have to put some sort of rigor into our visits. And then we got actually, you know, really quite strict with markets. And, you know, we would say, if it's not confirmed, we're not coming. we need to see X, Y, Z. And we started to kind of set the expectation for our visit so that, people had high expectations of what we could offer because we'd set them for that market, but equally we had expectations of the market too. So they, there was an expectation on both sides.
No, I think that's a great way. And I've seen that change because I used to experience the same thing. Like I would come to markets and then I would be there and it's like, okay, I'm here. And they didn't really have any set agenda. And I didn't have any set agenda. I was like, okay, I can go and visit these accounts. I could just go out drinking for the next 3 days, but I would like to actually do something of value. And I have seen the change through all the conversations I've had with many brand ambassadors now, where, some of them are booked 6 months in advance. Like they have really strict, like they have managers who put them on a schedule. It's like, okay, here are distributors, like this is their schedule. If you want to get on it, you need to let me know a couple months in advance. And these are the programs we're working on. So does that fit for your market? And if it doesn't, let's talk about it. But make sure that they are booked. They're going to be there for 3 days. Make sure there's value in those 3 days. Like, are they doing a distributor training? They're then do a brand training. Are they doing a guest part? Whatever it may be. And I was like, wow, that things have definitely progressed since your time. And it sounds like you ladies kicked it off. And it's also finding the value in yourself going, I'm worth something. So we should put a structure in place that they utilize me the right way.
Also, I have a terrible poker face. If I get somewhere and it's terribly organized, you can tell that I'm not happy about that. And I think, over the years, again, working closely with Ali, who's a dream, I'd be like, oh, Ali's super nice when she tells people that she's, disappointed. But I would have been like, what the hell is going on? Turning the table over. And so I had to learn how to, be a better ambassador to teach people how to get the most out of me. But I couldn't do that just being so overwhelmed. And so, I think I said to you yesterday, Elaine, learning how to rely on other people and learning how to collaborate was one of the biggest sort of learnings for me to be a better ambassador. And, if you are finding frustrations with going into markets or going into venues, it's only because of a breakdown of communication. It's only because of like misunderstandings that things aren't happening in the way that you want them to. So it's really about, I was always like attack as opposed to try and understand. Whereas now I'm a bit older, I'm like, let's just try and talk about what went wrong.
You're a little more diplomatic.
Fix it for next time. But yeah, I mean,
so calm.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah, exactly. And also just having planning, one of the things talked about in Brand Ambassador is that now realizing that 75% of your job is planning. Like you should be spending more time emailing, planning, and setting up expectations and planning beforehand. So that way you can not only push your expectations in the market, but you can have the conversation. Like, because sometimes programs you might have designed don't fit in a market. So it's like, okay, this doesn't work for you. What does work for you? Because if you try to push something down their throat, then they kind of, this is not for me. And then they don't utilize you at all in the right way. So,
and the great thing with planning is that you can then say, how was it? How did it go? This is what we hoped would happen. Did it happen? Why, what went well? What didn't go so well? And then you've got a bit of you've got something to respond to and to learn from and to make it better or to change it the next time. Whereas if you're just back to back and you're not learning anything. And, again, another big realization for us is that one of our roles is to feed back to the business. Work, it's not resonating, and you're there to listen and to learn and to absorb, as opposed to just being out there projecting and talking about your agenda. You're also there to like listen and feed back to the business.
Yeah, no, absolutely, because you are supposed to be a supporting player, not the lead when you go to other people's market. At least that's the conversation people I have gotten back from people. They're like, yeah, someone thing, and we talked about this yesterday, like not coming in being a diva and be like, I've arrived. So see me roar. I mean, Ali, you have to work with a team. So do you, when they're going into or working with people, is there any advice that you give to them to make sure they are able to achieve all their goals and be utilized correctly?
Yeah, I mean, I have to say my team, I'm really lucky. I don't just say this because they could potentially see this. I've got a really lucky team, really lucky team. I am really lucky with the team that I've got. And most of them I inherited. When I joined, there was 6 in the team, and then I hired 2. So 2 of them are new, but the other 6, were here before me, or were here. 2 of them joined at the same time as me, and they're just really all amazing, down to earth people. We've got a really, I would say, I don't know if this is good or bad. We're all very like-minded, and I think that we do think like a team. There really aren't any outliers who are, oh, I'm not going to do that because that's not my job. Even if, our tequila ambassador, for example, we had a Jack Daniel's event the other night, was really busy, and our tequila ambassador jumped on the bar.
Awesome.
Then our Woodford ambassador jumped on the bar, but it was, we were all there to support the Jack event. So it was like a one team, one dream thing. So I would say, in terms of me giving them advice when they go out and trade, or when they go out into the market, like I don't have anyone on my team who feels that they're above things. I would even say almost to their detriment, to the point where sometimes I think, you know what, you should push back, because that is not something that you need to be spending your time doing, and you got to preserve your energy.
Yes.
Mental health and physical health is such a huge thing now that we see with brand ambassadors, burnout, and just, it feels like the lifespan of the job has gotten shorter and shorter and shorter. All of us did roles as brand ambassadors for really long periods of time.
Saying no is definitely is also a big one. A lot of people talk about learning how to say no, learning how to push back, but providing a solution, saying, okay, you could utilize me. Yeah. As one person said, their boss, and I know I had to explain to somebody once and say, do you know how much you pay me? Like, do you really know? So like, you utilizing me for this particular thing is not a valuable use of what I was hired for. So, but I do have a solution, like, you should use this person. So I had to learn to push back, but with an alternative. So I wasn't being a diva or somebody like above it. I was just like, this is not what you should be utilizing me for at this moment in time in my career. There are other people that are just as equally suitable, but this is what they do all the time. And being able to provide that pushback, or else you will burn out and you do get kind of bitter.
Yeah, totally. And it's interesting, like, coming back to something Claire sort of touched on early on, and then what you're saying as well is, in the early days, which I have to say, I do sort of yearn for those early days. We did have a lot of fun, Claire and I, just like before we had that rigor and that structure. But, the idea that brand ambassadors are just glorified bartenders, I think that is something that has to change. And I think while people who work specifically in advocacy, or, specifically in this sector of the business, we understand that that's not really what the role should be. I think there's still a lot of people in other areas of our business, even in the marketing function and the sales function, who don't understand that. And so there's this expectation of, well, you can make drinks, so why don't you jump behind the bar and make them? Yeah. And it's exactly what you just said, Elaine, is, I've got specialists who are, it's not easy to hire brand ambassadors, because it isn't just, oh, well, you've answered these interview questions really well and you have the right degree. It's all about personality. It's all about, are you the right fit for that brand? Do you have charisma? You can't teach charisma.
No, and that's what we're going to talk about the next question, which was, you lined it up so perfectly. So you two have both hired brand ambassadors. So just leading into your question, what you're about to talk about was, because this is the question I get asked a lot by brand owners, like, what should I be looking for in a brand ambassador? And the second part is also, where do I find them? And what are some of the questions you might ask them to kind of weed out? It's hard, right? It's like, I know I saw the face like, not sure. Yeah. So let's talk about what do you look for? Like, you were saying charisma.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just one of these things. It feels like a weird thing to say when but you do. And I think sort of how, even though it was very odd how I got my start in this particular facet of the industry, it really was, I think, probably the most intense job interview I could have ever gone through. And I did all of the things that, fine, maybe I wasn't putting on a show every single time, even if that's what the expectation became. But the point is, you see really what someone's capable of. Like, if you're presenting every day in your job, which you are often in this role, can you present? And that's something that, often you get asked to do a prepared presentation, but how quick are you on your feet? How do you act under pressure? How are you in front of a crowd? These are things that you might not initially know when you hire a brand ambassador. And some of that, I think you have to go on feeling, you have to go on personal recommendation. I also think that, a lot of brand ambassadors, well, some of them come the traditional route of straight from bar, maybe having gone to college, maybe not having gone to college. And we can't judge them on the same criteria that you might hire somebody in marketing. I think that's difficult for a lot of companies like ours, to understand is, oh, well, we're recruiting through LinkedIn. And so recently when I was recruiting, I actually, spoke to the recruiters and said, look, we're not getting the best candidates through LinkedIn, because if we want a young up and coming bartender, they probably don't have a LinkedIn. And it's just not a skill that it's not a platform they know they need to have. So we actually recruited through some Facebook groups. We even did some recruiting on Instagram stories, just thinking like, where are young people looking?
No, I think that's great. That's great advice. I mean, I do tell, whenever I give, we give seminars about building your personal brand and getting out, because people ask me, how do I get a brand ambassador job? And I'm like, you should have at least a LinkedIn profile. Like everybody should have a LinkedIn profile, just because it puts you out there in the world. I mean, I got my job at Anheuser-Busch because I had a LinkedIn profile. That's where they found me. So it was like, I was not qualified for that job at all, but I looked good on LinkedIn. I got the interview, and I'm a really good interviewer. So I got hired. The next thing you know, I'm traveling around the globe, but you should. But I love the idea of the Instagram story and the Facebook. I think that's a great tool, because people ask, they're like, where do I find them? I'm like, and I think we talked about this yesterday. One thing I was told advice was, and I think it's really good, especially if you're looking for more diverse clients, and I know, candidates, is you should be recruiting all the time. Like when you're out,
great advice.
Yeah, when you're traveling, you should just be like, this person I think would be a potentially good brand ambassador. And they might be working for another brand, but I'm gonna just put a little note, like put them in my files, and we are looking. They, just give them a call, or like, this person was an amazing bartender. They really explain how the brand works. They really seem to be passionate about education. I'm gonna make a note that maybe they're the person, because when you're looking, it seems like everybody disappears.
I know.
Yeah.
I mean, I found it really hard to recruit. I will say, I mean, we went through a lot of rounds to recruit for the 2 roles that I recently hired. And, part of it was, one was for a tequila role, and we've got a great tequila ambassador. I mean, he's awesome. But another was for a portfolio ambassador role in the north of England. And I'm not based in the north, and I don't have a network up there. And, I really was relying on other people in our company and other people in my team who live in the northern cities to say, do you know anybody? And I think another thing that's really interesting, and I don't know if this is the right time to talk about this, but I really found, even though we're 3 women sitting here speaking about it, I really found a lack of female talent. And not that there's a lack of female talent, but there wasn't a talent pool. I couldn't find the females in certain regions of the country to apply. And maybe someone's going to be watching this and say, oh, you should have approached me. I mean, we looked. And what we did find was that a lot of the female bartenders we approached, they said, I'm not ready to make that leap. I'm really happy still working in venue. I want to see where my career can go on this side. Thank you for thinking of me. But what I did find was that there was a lot of very underqualified male candidates who were happy to throw their hat in the ring.
Well, you've heard that expression, right? And it's so true. Women, and this is the one thing, I did a diversity and inclusion seminar, and one of the things they talk about is to make sure you don't put anything in your ad that is not really necessary. Like, don't be like, oh, you have to be proficient in Microsoft Word. Like, you have to be an expert in Microsoft Word and PowerPoint and all these things, because a man will apply for a job if he's only like, I think it's something like 60% qualified for the role. We're a woman, or else we're like 90% qualified for the role, we're not applying. And that can really turn off a lot of candidates. But men, they're like, sure, I'll figure it out. Where women typically are like, well, like that would be dishonest if I said that. Yeah, men don't care.
Yeah, totally. No. Like one of the girls that we eventually did get to interview, we sort of pushed her to interview. She was like, I don't think I'm qualified. I was like, you are qualified. Like you are. Put yourself out there. Even to the point where, I was like, this is great practice for you. Like practice interviewing, which is something else I think
always
people
take
forget
the interview. About. Always. I always tell people that, Claire, like for you, you hired Ali. I mean, so what about, I know you're going to have to flatter Ali right now, but
She was crazy.
It worked out. She seems to be a great candidate, but there was something about her. I mean, everybody could do a good video. It could be a good, interviewee, but obviously there's certain candidates that make it, and she stayed. I mean, she ended up moving to a different country, got married, had kid, obviously all those things worked out. So what did you?
I can't take credit for any of that bit. I can't take credit for
my life.
I mean, but no, I think, I think it's a bit like dating in a way. You get a kind of feeling for somebody, and I think that some of the best ambassadors are warm, are genuine, are affable. You want to spend time with them. There's a authenticity to them when they're talking about their topic. They're not overbearing or arrogant. They're excited, they're curious, they want you to be curious about what they're talking about. They're inciting your curiosity, they're pulling you in. All of those elements are very difficult to teach. There's something, they're in this charisma. It's, who knows, it's a little bit of magic. And the other stuff you can teach, right? The presenting skills, you can teach that. Even, if you're not the best bartender, we can teach that. But there's something about, that person being able to draw people in, being a good storyteller. Ali, told lots of great stories through her presentation, and just a very natural presenter. And yeah, so all the sort of like the more technical stuff, even the proficiency in PowerPoint,
which I
love, which Ali didn't have, but I love PowerPoint. All that stuff can be taught. It's the,
But how about the entrepreneurial mindset? Because you do have to have, because it's not like your job, your 9-to-5 job. You don't come in, set up the bar, and then you're done. It's like, it's constantly going. And some people, that's very overwhelming. It's like, I don't know how you tell if that person, the only way for me I can see if a person has that is if they are doing things outside of their normal job. Like Ali was doing competitions, showing that you're doing things above and beyond your day-to-day somehow is a good indicator. What would you think about that?
We've had our...
I was going to say, Claire, you saw me in another competition that I lost. I think I had only done like maybe one or two other competitions where I made a really terrible tequila cocktail with a
but it's the fact you did the competition. It's that you practice, because being a brand ambassador in my mind is like somebody you're doing 17,000 jobs at once, right? So showing that when I say the entrepreneurial mindset, this is something I would love to hear. It's like, to me, it's like just you're doing above and beyond your job. You have your day job, but you're doing the WSET level 3s. You're doing the competitions. You're doing talks at trade shows. It's showing that you can handle multiple things. At least that's my thought.
And we've had, we've made mistakes. Hire people that haven't hustled. Brought people in and. I want someone to say to me, what else can I do? What more should I be doing? And, to be wanting more, is part of the role. And if you're not being given it, then you are out there seeking it yourself.
Mm-hmm.
We were constantly thinking about all of the different ways we could animate Belvedere. And, constantly like, what about this? Have you thought about this? That curiosity is super important, but it can't just be like head in the clouds. It has to be linked to, good commercial head as well. Like we could do a million different things with the brand, but is it going to convert into bottles sold? Are people going to get to understand the brand and then love the brand and then buy the brand? We can take people on lovely holidays. And we did a couple of times, but it was about health. But we can do that. But we could take them on lovely trips, but what's the trip for unless it's there to convert and to sell bottles? So having a good commercial mind is also important. And I think that comes back to being entrepreneurial. You're there to be, you're the ultimate salesperson, really. You're there to sell. And again, sometimes I speak to some ambassadors who don't want or don't see their role as selling, or are uncomfortable, when they're sort of in that sales conversation, don't want to close, don't want to ask for the business. And ultimately, that's why you're there. That is why you're there. the technical stuff all day long. We can talk about, mash bills and filtration and everything, but you need to understand, you need to have in your mind, how am I going to close this sale? How am I going to get this, how am I going to get the brand listed? How are we going to get, the brand selling twice as much as it was selling yesterday? So
going into corporate, because obviously it is a big jump when you go into corporate, and I think Claire froze, and going into that corporate role is very, it can be very overwhelming. And I know we talked about this before, Ali, yesterday, a little bit about that overwhelming, and Claire, we talked about this as well. Like, there are certain changes you have to make about yourself to kind of fit into that corporate role, and you also need to be able to preserve who you are, which is not always an easy transition. But I want to put it more, we'll talk about like what things you can struggle with, but also let's talk about how do you learn that commercial side, because you might not have, and this is definitely something for those who want to progress in their career, they need to understand that commercial side of the business. And I want to talk about, like, okay, the struggles you can have at corporate when you're first starting, and then how you can use corporate to then progress your career. Like, how you can use it to learn the things you need to learn, like the commercial side of the business. So Claire, you first came on to corporate. You came from, the bar world, right? Into the corporate world of Moet and Hennessy, which is very corporate and very French. Some of the things you
really. I didn't know what to do, so I kind of sat between.
You're cutting out a little bit.
I'm
going to go with Ali first. Ali, talk about it, and then Claire will come back on. Ali, how was your transition into corporate?
Yeah, so mine was, I would say it was pretty intense. I was working as a bartender, and I had finished college probably, I was 25 when I joined, just nearly 26 when I joined Belvedere. So I had finished college maybe 3 years earlier, and even though I had a degree and had plans to get the quote unquote real job, I was making really good money working behind a bar, and it was the days of making cash tips in New York City, and like that was too good to walk away from. Life was fun, and so then the idea that I would have this corporate job and that there would be a calendar that I'd have to manage, and there was meetings and appointments, and obviously I think had the transition been very much, it's 9 to 5, you come into your office at 9, you leave at 5, which I would have hated. But had it been that, at least that would have been something I understood. But I think it comes back to what you were saying before, Elaine, about how there's this, this starterness. I'm not sure if that's a word, but this need to sort of, you're always working, right? Like your job isn't 9 to 5. Your job is anytime you are out and about, you're representing the brands. You are constantly, you are the face of the brand. You are the physical embodiment of the brand. And so some days your day might be 9 to 5 and you might be doing admin, but a lot of days it might be you're on a photo shoot, you're traveling, you're on market visits, you're speaking to distributors. And so that for me, I think was a big challenge because it was corporate, but there was also this level of freedom. And so it was never just you go into the office, you have your HR meeting, you're told what the dress code is, and you sit at your desk. It was, you work for Moet Hennessy, the most corporate of the corporates. Everyone's French and wearing a suit. And then here I was.
And it's a Vuitton suit.
Yes, a Vuitton suit. That's so true. And then here I was with what I thought were my like office attire clothes. And I always just looked a little bit messy and disheveled in those early days. And I just, it was a hard transition. Like Claire said, I mean, I didn't use PowerPoint. Like I have a liberal arts degree. I wrote a lot of stuff in Word, used my MLA format and knew how to do all of that. But I didn't have a design background. Not saying you need a design background to know how to use PowerPoint, but honestly,
Ali, I've worked for the 2 biggest companies in the world. I still suck at PowerPoint. I hate PowerPoint, and I now have a contract with my clients. Like, if you ask me to make a PowerPoint presentation, it's not going to happen. Like, I will charge double for the PowerPoint presentation. If you ask me, I will just, if you want a Word document, you can take it. And I do have ways of cheating. And
I'll do it. I love it.
Claire's so good.
Yeah. Some people love it. And I would tell my Anheuser-Busch, I was like, I could do this job in double time if you didn't make me put it into a freaking deck. Like I could just like bang through everything. But the fact that you make me sit and then trying to come up with the perfect graphs and images and the 3 words that have to go on a slide that you're going to show you once. Oh, I hate it.
I'm in like Excel thinking, how can I turn this into a PowerPoint?
I know. I have to say, I actually really see the value in PowerPoint now, but that Claire taught me so much. I remember so many, like looking at so many of her presentations, and I would love to be able to dig up like one of the first presentations I ever made and look at it now, like one of the first ones that I ever thought was really good, and look at it now and be like, Remember, Claire, that when you got really into transitions and you were always like animating slides? So the slides, it would be like the next slide and the words would fly in from the left.
Oh, yeah.
I only got good at PowerPoint because I once sent a deck to someone, a marketing director, who literally ripped it to shreds. You know, it was like my fonts were different sizes and, you know, just took it to pieces. And I was like, who cares about that? There's a different font to that. And then he actually made me see how untidy it was. I mean, at the time, I didn't take the criticism well. I was very upset about it. But I was like, actually, these small details, that attention to detail matters, you know, up on a big screen. Now, if I see like, I'm like, oh my God, that font's a different font, or it's different size, or they didn't use a bullet point there, too many words, you know. So, you know, it on a big screen, this attention to detail is critical.
It does matter. And I know I make fun of it. I now actually pay people at Fiverr to do sometimes if it's really important, I send it to somebody there and I'm like, here's the general concept. I pay them $25 and they make it nice and they send it back. That's like literally it's worth every dollar. I'm like, here's all the things. I'll make the initial slides. Could you just make it pretty? And I send it over to them. And the other cheat is Canva.
Canva's great.
Yeah.
Canva's great.
Canva's
I steal
great.
all my slides from Canva and they make me look like a genius. Yeah, no, well, so there's definitely things. So speaking of bicarb, so that's definitely, I heard that a lot. Every brand about tells me like, oh my God, the PowerPoint, like, you know, I didn't know how to use any of it. And it's something we definitely need to know how to use because it is important in corporate life, and being accurate is really important because people do judge you. They judge you by your grammar and your writing and your spelling and everything else. You're judged all the time.
I mean, I judge people by that too. So I'm
That's why I have Grammarly. That's the other thing that helps me out. Like that corrects me. But knowing the commercial side of the business, you know, how big was it at, say, like a Belvedere? Like when you were there, did they allow you in like, were you in the meetings? Because I know, Claire, we'll talk about like you transitioned from somebody who was a brand ambassador to being on innovation and making spirits. So you had to learn some of that corporate side and that commercial business. So how did that work for you? Like within the company, how did you learn that? Like, how did the people bring you in the meetings? Did you ask to be part of meetings? Like, what were some of the things you did?
I was in the meeting. Hello, I'll just be here talking about what I think we should be doing. You don't want me here. Well, I'm sorry, I'm here now. But
all I can hear, Claire, is Viswav saying, Claire, do you know what the cogs are on that?
Cogs. Oh my God. Yeah. No, I think I was very idealistic for a long time, and so I didn't really understand the commercial side. I'd be like, we want to make banana Belvedere. It's going to be delicious. Everyone's going to drink it. It's going to be great. And then, you know, the finance team, the technical team was, but these are the cogs, the cost of goods of what a banana Belvedere would cost to make. And I would be like, so what? It's going to be delicious. And that was for a while, probably a few years, the battle between me and the finance team. You know, our poor finance director must have been just like whacking his head on the desk, because I'd be like, but Francois, it doesn't matter because it's going to be the best flavor ever. But in time, you realize that actually, in order to get a decision across the line, the decision maker is not necessarily the president, it's the finance team, it's the distilling team, it's the, you know, and actually one of the biggest learnings that I had was those decisions, those big decisions are often not made when you're in that conference room. Those decisions are made in side conversations, in a coffee with Vislav in the distillery, in a quick chat with Francois about how popular bananas are this year. And we can get some really good costs on bananas, Francois, don't worry. And, you know, then you come into that conversation, that commercial conversation, and everyone's feeling comfortable about the fact that Belvedere banana is going to be the next big thing. So, but that took a long time. But the great thing about commercial, the corporate world is that you do have, if you at your disposal, teams of people that you can sit with, you can talk to, you can ask questions, you know. And at Moët Hennessy, I always found that no question was a silly question. You know, I could go to the finance director and have a conversation with him. He terrified me. You know, he won't mind me saying that because he was scary.
Oh, he's so lovely. He loved you,
but
though.
He's such a sweetheart. But, you know, you could, there were resources at your disposal. There were people there that you can say, I don't understand this. Can I just have 5 minutes and can you just take me through it? Because, you know, we had that meeting, something I didn't understand. You know, it's a bit like being at school. If you don't ask and if you don't use those resources, you really won't learn, and you won't. And crucially, in corporate world, relationships are key. People are key. Who you know, who is sponsoring you, who is saying nice things about you when you're not in the room. All of that is very important, and it often gets labeled as like the politics. And I think the more positive way of thinking about that is like you need to build your network internally as much as you do externally. You know, those people will do a lot of heavy lifting for you when you're not there. So yeah, that's how I kind of transitioned several
and that's
times.
like where you learned like all the information you needed to learn, because you asked all the questions and you found the right people to speak to. I guess the hard part is maybe that makes a lot of sense. Networking, it's literally how, and when I worked for Diageo, it really kept my career going. And some of my clients now are some of my old Diageo corporate people I used to talk to who have left the company and now are working for other corporations because they remember me from all the side conversations. And I always tell a new brand I'm like, don't be afraid at the cocktail party to go talk to the president.
No, exactly. They love it. They love
that. They really do. But I guess it's harder for a lot of the small brands that are out there, like the people that don't have a corporate world. It's just you, the owner. I don't know. What would you suggest for them?
That's a lonely space. But again, you know, as we talked about yesterday, our industry, I feel, is very open, very collaborative. You know, if there's a question, if you're feeling unsure, reach out and ask people the question. You know, network. Build your network outside of the bar. You know, go and have a coffee and talk about, you know, spreadsheets or whatever. But you know, don't feel I'm still a bit dodgy with spreadsheets, but you know what I mean? Like, you know, there's always somebody to ask in this business. And I've always felt that, in fact, my experience has been, if I've reached out to anybody and asked a question, no one's ever said, I'm not helping you. You know, we're brilliant at helping each other. You know, and it might be I'm a bit busy at the moment, or I'm not the right person to ask, but I think we're really giving with our time as an industry.
No, absolutely. I think brand owners are really giving. It's like, you know, I recommend like if you're working with a smaller brand, you know, ask the brand owner, can I sit in the planning meetings with you? Can I be part of that conversation so I can just hear, because I'm out in the streets and I'd like to have a contribution, or at least listen so I understand what the bigger picture is. And for anybody who is a brand owner listening to any of these conversations, it's like you should make sure any brand ambassadors working for you, whether part-time or full-time, has the big picture, who understands where your brand is going and what your goals are, so they understand what ideas they should present back.
And our president was really good at bringing people in to those senior exec meetings so that they had the opportunity to listen to what was being said, to present, to have a voice. You know, it wasn't always this sort of senior, what we would call the COMEX, the executive committee. It was, you know, he would always bring lots of people in for their opinions, their feed, you know, to feed in. And if you know, if you wanted to present, or if you had an idea to share, he would always say, you know, innovation comes from everywhere. You know, one of the biggest innovations at Belvedere, I think, was the what's it called, Ali?
I was gonna say lightsaber, but wasn't it a lightsaber?
Yeah,
no, but it wasn't a lightsaber. What were they?
You know,
Isn't that in Star Wars?
The bottle glorifier?
You'd glorify, but it fitted into the punt of the bottle, and I mean it revolutionized sales in the nightclub channel, which of course I didn't know anything about because I was never in nightclubs. But and Ali was. I was like, you go. But that came from a guy in a remote market who just had this idea and presented it to Charles, and all of a sudden it's a global innovation. This is 10 years ago. So put your hand up and ask to be in those meetings, and if nothing else, listen and constantly be listening and asking questions.
No, I think that's all great advice. Well, I want to go on to something that Ali and I started talking about yesterday. We actually started our conversation because we were talking about bios. And this seems so trivial, but it's so important because all of us have had our bios, written. I remember my first bio, being sent out there in the world. It was terrible. It really was. It was terrible what was written. I think the PR team wrote it for me. The internal bio, and they didn't know me. They didn't know things I'd done. I actually had Philip write it, and it was amazing. I was like, I'd hire me. Like, he wrote it. It was freaking
That's good
brilliant.
advice, though. Get someone else to write it.
You really need. So let's talk about that, because because I've seen a lot of people on this that I have on the show. I have them send my bios, and some of them I'm like, I know you. This doesn't describe half the things that you do. And it doesn't sound like, it's not that exciting, to read. So Ali, I know you've been working with your team, and it is something I tell brands, you need to write a bio for your team. You need to make sure they have headshots, that they have bios, because they might be asked for. And it's something that people don't think about. It's like, it's not the first thing that they think about, but I think it's really important. And Ali, you've been doing it for your team. So why did you decide to write everybody's bios?
Well, so this is quite funny because I still haven't sent Elaine my bio.
No.
I was like, worried about sending mine now as well.
You did send me your bio. I think you did.
But saying that, as we've all just said, it's really hard to write about yourself, and it's really hard to write about yourself in the third person. It feels weird. It also feels weird to, to speak about yourself really highly. You think, oh, is that a big deal? Do people care that I did that? Probably no one cares. And I found that with my team. I said to all of them, you all need a bio. And they all wrote their bios. And then I went back in and edited a lot of them to make them as glorious as they should be, to say, look, you're really not doing yourself credit here. Like, this is a big deal. You need to, really shout about this thing that you did. And I think for a lot of them, it is this, because I'm not saying that as a brand ambassador, you should be all about self-promotion, because that's not my style anyway. But I do think there is an element of, you need to be confident, because ultimately you are the face of the brand. Mm-hmm. And you spoke about before, Elaine, your own personal brands, like, you are most likely being hired for the job because you have a strong personal brand, because you are someone who's persuasive, because you are someone that people trust and that people like. I mean, it's about likability as much as anything else, isn't it?
It is.
You can have lots of knowledge, but if you're not likable, people are just going to come away from that being like, wow, what a thoroughly boring individual.
There are some ambassadors like that. But there are some, no names.
Yes, there are.
And I think, like Claire said before, you can learn the facts, and also we've got Google. Like, if you want to know how long something was charcoal mellowed, well, you can Google it. But if you want to hear a really cool story about a time that Slane pops to mind, but if you want to hear a really cool story about some of the musicians who've played at the Slane Music Festival, our brand ambassador, he's a wealth of knowledge about all of the he can tell you about all of these cool acts that played there, and he can tell you all about the sustainability of the brand, and he can just tell you all these really fun facts that you aren't going to find online. And that's the reason that people remember that brand. But I think when you're writing a bio, you don't think about the trivial stuff. You don't think about, the small awards or the small interests you have that humanize you. My favorite part of anyone's bio is the last line at the end, where it says, like, Claire currently resides in London with husband Dan, dog Mac. Claire enjoys,
you know my bio.
I know. Yeah.
I'm just thinking, how would I end it? What does Claire love?
It does say that.
Does it say that? Yeah.
I know people like me, like, because we have a gecko named Dave. So they're like, oh, you have a gecko?
Oh, do you have a gecko named Dave?
I have a gecko named Dave. Yeah. He's 15, 12 years old now, I think. Yeah.
That's a good way of...
That's a great thing that someone will remember about you. And it's those facts that will endear someone to you and the brands. I mean, we have, the bios come through whenever we've got new starters, and there's a girl who just started for us, and I haven't actually met her yet, but I'm quite intrigued to meet her because in her bio, she apparently used to be a former professional badminton player for Great Britain.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. Low achiever. And she retired in 2014, and then she did all this other amazing stuff. But like, I kind of glossed over, you know, her education and where she's from, and it was all that stuff that I thought, well, this is an interesting person. I'd love to know more about her. And that's why bio is super important.
I think it is.
And I think every line needs to do a lot of heavy lifting, right? So like no filler. I don't know if you've ever, trim the fat. But one of the best bios I've ever read, in fact, 2 bios, Charlotte Voices and Laura Moats. I came away, I mean, literally blown away. I felt, you know, in awe and not worthy to call them colleagues, peers, friends, because every line was, oh my God, that's amazing, in a really kind of like genuine, authentic way. And that's how a bio should leave you. Like, I want to meet that person. That's like so exciting. And wow, I want to talk about that. And you did that. And it's not about, you know, bragging. There's a really great book actually called can I swear, Elaine?
Well, you can swear all the fuck you want.
Okay. It's called, well, there's 2 books. There's Fuck Being Humble, which is a really great book.
I'm gonna write this down.
And I'm just going to say Claire gives the best book recommendations also. And I don't know where she finds the time to read as many books as she does, but every book that Claire's ever recommended is great. So I will say that about you.
And Brag Better. So those 2 books. So Brag Better is by an American author. So you've got that American perspective. And Fuck Being Humble is written by a British author. So you've got the British humility, which is why it's called Fuck Being Humble. So both books really great for anybody who's kind of grappling with their personal brand or how to approach their bio or just how to personally promote themselves without being a dick.
Yeah, I love that. No, and don't being a dick is definitely one of my lines of, you know, one of my biggest advice being a brand ambassador. But the last part I'm going to add to this thing about having a bio, what's also so important is it also gives a way for people to be able to explain you. So like when the distributor, if you're working with your distributor or your sales rep, sometimes, you know, now it's more accept like, oh, this is our brand ambassador, but be able to say, this is our brand and send over like, this is all the things that they've done. Like they worked at this amazing bar. They were the head mixologist. They had awards. And then suddenly the people that you are coming in to talk to are suddenly paying attention.
Yeah.
Like they're listening. It's not like, oh, it's just another brand ambassador. Like this person has done these amazing things. Like I remember for myself, because it was very hard for them to explain me. I was a self-taught mixologist, right? I came from the marketing side. I had no street cred at all. So it was like, this is Elaine. She makes drinks, like, you know, and that was it. And the minute I did Bar Rescue, it was like, even as shitty as that show was, people loved it. So they were like, this is Elaine. She's from Bar Rescue. And people lined up. They were like, what does Elaine have to say? It was, I was like, whoa, what just happened? And like people, I would have lists of people like coming to the bar just to talk to me. And like whatever I said was like gold. I was like, wow, I better make sure I'm saying the right thing.
Your bio, your hype. Was it your hype person? You know, think of it like that is the way that you want to be introduced when you're not in the room. And that's why every single word has got, every single sentence has got to be like, wow, yay.
Yeah. So I think to sum it up, we're going to read those books. Make sure you have somebody else write it for. I think you have to have somebody else write your bio, then have somebody else like put the facts that you think are important. Yeah. All the things you've achieved in your life, brag, dump the bragging, everything, and then have somebody else like kind of finesse it to make it.
The other thing I would say is that it's quite difficult to remember all of the great stuff that you do.
Yes.
So when you have success or when you've done something you're proud of, like have it on your notes, have it on your phone, whatever it might be, a great article about you, you know, you did this TV show, pop it in there as your like, you know, hype notes. And refer back to it, because your bio also isn't something that is static. I rewrite mine every year because stuff happens, right? So all those little nuggets, you'll recall them or put them in your notes, because it's really easy, right, to hold on to the things that went wrong and the mistakes you made. You know, your brain naturally will hold on to those things. and will let go of all the great stuff that you've done. So when you're coming to sit down and write your bio, those things, those memories are kind of, gone. So yeah, write down all the things that you're proud of in the moment. What made you proud? What does it make you feel? What do people say? Where's it reported? And then revert back to that when you write your bio come January.
I think that's great words of advice. Yeah. I was
going to say, you said before, Elaine, about the always be recruiting, right?
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
It's basically the same. These are both really practical nuggets that I've not thought of that I am now going to do. Thank you both for
you're welcome. No, it is true. And also,
tidbits.
I think it's also important for you sometimes to just read all the stuff you've done, because sometimes you forget. And whenever you're feeling, I do it, and I have a journal and things that I write. But sometimes one exercise I had to do for a woman empowerment course that I took a long time ago was you had to write all the things you've ever accomplished from the time you were a kid. From I got an award or whatever. And if I'm ever feeling a bit overwhelmed or insecure, am I good enough? Everybody has that moments. I go back and read that.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I've done all these things.
It's good. And, in our roles, there's more of us now, but in the beginning, there weren't many people like us around. And so, you had to hype yourself. You had to remember what you were there to do, and actually you're good at what you do. Because like I say, your brain will hold on to all the things you did wrong and will get rid of all the things you did right. So absolutely, you need to, make a note of all the badass things you've achieved.
And we've all done a lot of bad.
All right, print it out and put it on the wall.
Put it on the wall, exactly. I have a whiteboard.
Well, also, if you're not in control of your own bio, then you end up having what happened to you, Elaine, and I know it's happened to me as well. You have a PR write your bio, and then suddenly you get introduced in some way that you're not comfortable with, and ultimately you are you got to be in control of your own destiny. You are the author.
Oh my God. So. Oh, I have a great example of this, a live example of this. Every single time I did Conan, every time he would refer to me as a molecular mixologist.
I remember this.
Really?
I did it 3 or 4 times, and I was always on there with smoke and mirrors and fire, because for some reason he thought I was a molecular mixologist, and he'd be like, bring out the Bunsen burners and the science kit.
Wow.
So yeah, be in control of your own bio. Otherwise you'll be making foams and gels for life.
and things that you're not comfortable doing. That is great. Be in control of your own career, and also your own bio and how people introduce you.
Yeah. The first time I ever made a blue blazer was live on telly with Conan. So, I
remember that.
With the fireman, with the fire extinguisher. That was the first time I ever did that thing. Yeah. So,
wow.
Be careful what happens.
Be careful how people introduce you and what people say you can do if you really, really can't do it.
No, you'll be throwing fire and putting on a show.
No, exactly.
I think we have time. I was going to say, we still have time. All right. So I think another point to this point about working with PR and agencies, I think there's some life lessons that people need to know, especially if you're new and you're getting into this role and you're going to be working with a lot of agencies. You're going to be working with event agencies, PR agencies, and a lot of, at least the mistakes I know I made, but sometimes I would just go with the flow because I didn't want to be a diva or a pain in the ass, and things would just be wrong, right? They would have the wrong ingredients, or they would have the wrong glass, and and then it wasn't until I got more experience that I realized, okay, I need to stick up for myself and be like, no, because this is going to be on video. It's going to be on film. It's going to be out there in the world. And it's not you that's going to look like an ass. It's going to be me that looks like an ass and doesn't know it's my reputation on the line. And suddenly, I'm making, a drink that's like, a gin Ricky, and I only have vodka or whatever it is. And it's very apparent that it's not the thing that I'm saying, and it's in my hand. And they're like, oh, it's fine. It's one of the brands. And then realize also sometimes when you can just go with it because you're like, oh, nobody's going to tell what it is as long as it's the right color. It's fine. So do you have any stories or best practice you've learned of just how to work with PR agencies and when to be, to ask for what you need? Ali, have you ever been there?
Yeah, well, I think much like you, when I started, I was also always afraid to hence why I basically agreed to do a flare show on top of, Singapore's tallest building, because I thought, well, I guess it's fine. thank God I didn't. Imagine how wrong that could have gone. But I think it really comes back to really what is the role, advocacy. You got to be an advocate for yourself first and foremost. And I think you have to, it's a learned skill. And I think it does come with maturity. Just the fact of what we started talking about at the beginning of this conversation is learning how to say no and learning how to, when you say no, you offer another solution. And Elaine, I know you and I spoke about this as well. I think sometimes, to be careful how I say this, but with drinks, sometimes other agencies, who perhaps the marketing side or the PR who are not specific to drinks PR, they might say, oh, it's just a drink. How important is it? Like, how much does it really matter if the garnish is wrong? Or how much does it really matter if there's not enough ice in the drink? And, I don't know if you both do this, but when I watch a film or a show and there's a bar scene and a drink gets served and it looks like, dog shit, it's the first thing I notice. The first thing I notice is, why was there no drink stylist? Who served that martini with that wash line? Why does that drink look warm? And for me, it takes a production like, you look at like a James Bond film and you think, God, look at how amazing and flawless these action scenes are, because they had stunt people. They had people at the height of their craft. And then when it comes to food and drink, I feel sometimes it gets pushed aside as like, oh, who cares? It's not that important. No one's going to notice. You don't notice when a drink is really well made. You don't notice when food is really well made. You notice when it's poor, right? And that's like we're sort of talking about with everything, is you remember the bad stuff. You don't remember the good stuff. And so it's really, I think it comes with experience. And I think it does just come from, you have to be willing to say, I'm not comfortable with that, but let me be a solution. Or you might but let me explain to you why it is. I know Claire and I used to do that a lot. We had to push back and say, look, this is the integrity of our brand. And there was a lot. I think bartenders nowadays or brand ambassadors, I should say, are in a better position now because there are a lot more of us. Advocacy as a career and education as a career within the spirits world is, it's every big company has an advocacy department now. Brand ambassadors are, I don't want to say a dime a dozen. I don't mean it that way, but they're important in the sense that, companies are doubling down on having us.
No, absolutely. And I think one thing I learned how to do was I started not relying on them to do the right thing, because they were not they didn't know. And I couldn't blame them. So then I'd be like, can I see the list? Can I see the list of the things that you plan on having on set? So I would make sure, and then I would send back my own list. I'd be like, okay, you have that. So these are other things you need. And and I would always bring my own bar tools, because I realized, they would have some bar tools from 1980, the wide jigger that's like, side of your head.
The little kit from like Crate and Barrel, that would just appear. Yeah.
So having those things, like having control, like, and realizing, don't rely on this certain things, just bring your own stuff, bring your own, I just bring my own knives, tools, everything else, because and then, or I'd send pictures. These are the pictures. This is exactly what it should look like, because if it's not this, then don't get it. And
I think for me, I was like, what do you need? What's your, like, in the PR, the PR agency or the events agency, like what does good look like for you? How are we going to achieve that together? If it's you want this journalist to write about the martini that I'm going to make, then let's talk about that. How are we what's the angle? Like, really, like, talking about what success looks like, because we had a lot of challenges when we had a very, very high profile martini film partnership, which I'm still nervous to say the name of in case we get sued. But for about a year, Ali and I were just doing lots of lots of education around the martini with PR agencies from all over the world. There's a real emphasis on that drink being shaken, not stirred. And so we had to try and get people to understand that there are, that drink is great shaken, but it's also great stirred, because there's an integrity to that drink that we are still custodians of as a vodka brand, that we need to ensure people take away from our conversation around what makes a great martini. So it was always, a conversation with the PR, what are we looking to achieve in this interview? Well, we want them to talk about this martini. Great. Okay, well, these are things that are important for us to communicate as a vodka brand, a super premium vodka brand. these are the things that you want us to talk about, and let's just be comfortable that I'm going to be saying that stirred martinis are delicious as well as shaken martinis are as well, okay, so that there's no surprises. So I think it's just about really like getting everything like out on the table and saying, you know, where are the red lines here, like where can we assert our authority, and where should we respect, you know, your pitch, your angle, your story. And so, you know, there was a couple of interviews that came out and I got yelled at on a beach. I'll never forget, I was on holiday and I got yelled at for saying like, oh, shaken martinis, I prefer a stirred one, whatever. So, you know, it's, you know, again, setting up expectations and trying to manage everybody's expectations so that everybody succeeds.
No, I think that's great advice. It's like making sure that you have that compromise. Like, these are the things that have to be said. These are the things that have to get across from the brand side. What is your vision? Let's find the compromise. Because I have been asked to say things and I'm like, that's not how we communicate our brand. I don't, you know, it's like, so I don't think we should say that. I think we should have a conversation. And I've actually had to call a boss and be like, you might want to come in here, like, because I'm getting pushback because I'm, you know, they're just looking at me like, oh, you're just a mixologist. You know, I need a director here to be like, no, this is the conversation. Like, we need to have these elements come across. But yeah, trying to work together, I think, is really, really, really key.
Well, I have a really funny story about that. Well, it was before I worked for Belvedere, but it was when I used to work at Madame Geneva. There was, I can't remember what the show was, and I've actually never seen it, but there was, maybe you remember, Elaine, there was like a cable access show. It wasn't Bar Rescue, but it was like a cable access show where they went around to different bars and each week was a different spirit. It was like, and here we are, we're going to do gin and we're going to visit some gin bars. And this week it's vodka and we're going to visit. Anyways, cable access, I never saw it. So Madame Geneva, obviously they came in to do gin, and there was a few of us, me and Laura Lashley and Martine, like we were all there and we each had a little part, and we used to do these jam cocktails, like a gin sour with a spoon of jam on top, and then you put the jam in and you'd stir it, and that was the Madame Geneva signature way back in the day. And so the director, so I was making the drink, and the director then wanted me to say, and there you have it, gin and jam, 3 ways. And I was like, okay. So he says, so if you could just say something like this. So I was like, well, I'm not going to say it just like that because that sounds lame. So I made the drink and I pushed the drink forward and I was like, and there you go. This is my version of a gin and jam cocktail. Something, you know, just less, more like me. Yeah. He was like, that was really great. If you could just do it again. And this time, maybe something more along the line of, and there you have it, gin and jam, 3 ways. I was like, okay, yep. Do it again. Again, I like ad lib it and go slightly away from the thing. He's like, right, yeah, really, that was a great take. Just one more time. And if you could just say exactly these words in this order, that would be great. And I was like, okay, there you have it. Gin and jam, 3 ways. Anyway, so I never saw this show. Fast forward a few years later, when I moved to London, I was in a bar over here, this bar called Hawksmoor, and I met Liam Davey for the first time. And so I was introduced to Liam Davey, bar manager at the time of Hawksmoor. And my then boyfriend, now husband, he said, oh, Liam, this is, you know, my girlfriend, Ali. She just moved here from New York. And he goes, he looks so familiar to me. Have we met before? I was like, don't think so. And he was like, oh my God, you're the gin and jam girl. And so then he calls his girlfriend out. He's like, Missy, come here. So he comes out and she's the gin and jam girl. And Missy looks at me and she goes, oh my God, you are. There you have it. Gin and jam, 3 ways.
Oh my God.
And it was this moment, like they had been living in New York for a few months, and they said one night we were up really late and this weird cable access show came on, and we laughed for hours about that line. And all we could think about was, and there you have it, gin and jam, 3 ways.
Gin and jam. See, this is why you have to stand up for yourself.
This is why you got to say no, because I mean, we're good friends now, but I just love the idea that before Liam and I knew each other, he was having a field day laughing about.
He was mocking you. You became part of the drinking game. Yeah, that is so funny. So no, I've had people come up to me and tell me things I've done on TV, and I'm like, yep, I totally did that. I can't even remember them anymore. I blocked them out. They were so painful. I'm just like, I've learned my lesson. Do not be, just don't go with the flow. All right, so ladies, I know we're kind of coming up on the hour, so an hour, almost an hour and a half. So I want to wrap it up. So I always ended up with this last question, just so other people can learn. So if there's one failure or one thing you ever thought, besides some of the things we already discussed in here, that you might have you fucked up. You might not have an experience and you're like, should never have done that. I wish somebody had told me that. I hope somebody never does this. If they can learn one thing, they should never do this one thing. So, Claire, I'll start with you. Is there anything you want to own up
Don't
to?
get drunk.
Ah.
Don't get drunk.
That's good advice.
Don't get drunk.
She's not going to own up to a
Don't get
time she got drunk, but she's just going to say, no, it's
no, no, don't get drunk, particularly when there's a camera crew or you've got to do a presentation, and you're there to do a job. Once the job's done and the camera's gone and your presentation's over, yeah, of course, have a drink, relax, whatever. But just, yeah, I always would overestimate my ability to present well if I'd had a drink, and it took a little while for me to accept that, and now I go the other way. I like overly prepare, because there's been times when I've literally lost my thread and had a panic attack because I'm like, oh, I've had a drink and I can't remember what I'm meant to be talking about now, and it's the worst feeling. And there's alcohol everywhere because you're a brand ambassador and people are like, you're doing a tasting, you're in the moment. My advice is just don't drink until you're done, until you're off the clock, and then have a cocktail. Have a shaken martini. They're delicious.
I can't agree with that, because I have had moments. I do always used to over again, just even this year, like realizing, like, you know what? I watched some of my videos where I've had drinks and I watched them when I didn't. I was like, oh, I'm so much better when I don't actually have a drink. So I have now made it a policy where I'm just having my water and beforehand, because I am better and my mind is clearer. So I'll have a drink after this, but just just to celebrate my win. And Ali, for you?
So I'm going to follow on, I think, from Claire's advice, but this is advice that I got in the presentation coach training. So the presentation media training, basically. And the media coach said to me, he said, the interview's never over. Just so you know, like, you may be sitting there with a journalist or with someone from the bar, and let's say the journalist says to you, cool, great, that's everything, and they turn the camera off or turn the tape off or turn whatever else off, and then it's that moment when you come in and go, oh, whew, glad that's over, like, oh, I could really use a drink, or, oh, actually what I really love is a Grey Goose and tonic, just all these, you sat there talking about, everything above board. And what he said to me was, he said, the interview's never over. There's no such thing as off the record. There's lots of tricks that journalists can use. Maybe they've got like a camera on, the sound part still on in another part of the room. And what that really just taught me was, in this role, especially when you are the face of the brand, just because, you're out drinking on your night off, you should still be drinking your brands, right? If you represent that brand, it's because it's a brand you love and it's a brand that you truly believe in. And that's not to say that you can never have a beer or a wine if you work for a spirit company, but I think you have to live your values. And so, the interview's never over and you're never off the clock is my best advice.
No,
I don't drink any other vodka still. I mean,
I don't either.
It's so funny. I'm allowed to, obviously. But
they do start to live within you. Like, they do start, like, it's very hard for me. I've tried really hard to find another Reposado tequila that I love more than Don Julio Reposado, but there isn't. And I've tried many, and I just love it. It's still the brand I buy, and for me, it's just I even though I don't work for the brand anymore. I mean, I've worked for the full portfolio, and I will drink different whiskeys and whatever. And I still love Bullet, and I still love. I like my Kettle One. I won't say the same about Ciroc anymore. They've done bad things to that brand, and I just don't want it. Makes me sad. I was gonna say, talking about the mics and the mics being off. Always remember, like, if you have, my thing is like the battery pack thing on, and it's on, and you're on set, and you go to the loo, make sure you turn it off.
Oh, nothing more embarrassing than that.
You don't want it to end down the loo.
You don't want it to end down the loo either. You don't want your conversations to be recorded when you're not on set and you're still talking, and because it's attached to you.
I think, just you're always on, right? In that role, you're on until you really know, until you're back in your hotel room, you shut the door, or you're until you're completely, you know that you're not on. But while you're working, particularly if you're traveling for work, you're constantly representing the brand, and that's like being really great representation of the brand at 3 a.m. in a nightclub, and then showing up at 9 a.m. smart clean, not stinking of booze, to do a great presentation. And that is what a lot of people find very difficult to be able to do both of those things. But that is the hallmark of a great ambassador.
If you have a logo on your shirt, yeah, thanks, you're always on. It's
Yes,
so true. And making sure you're not wearing the wrong logo.
Yes.
Don't be wearing other people's brands if you're representing. Don't
That's a good point. I was just thinking, I was looking at how great the photo of that he's got there with his logo perhaps on his shirt. I thought that was really I don't know if that was intentional, but like that's quite cool.
Super dad.
Yeah, super dad with his kids.
Super dad. Thanks, Anna, for tuning in. Well, ladies, this was fantastic. It was really lovely catching up with the both of you. It's been way too long. I look forward to being able to do this in person. Thanks again for coming on. There's a lot of great tidbits in here that I hope a lot of people learn from.
Yeah, thanks so much,
Elaine. Thanks for giving the platform for me to have a nice chat with one of my besties.
See you on Saturday.
Yes, see you Saturday.
All right, ladies. Thank you again.
Take care.
I look forward to seeing you soon. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.